Alex, welcome to the Power Within You podcast. It's really, really lovely to have you here today. And you're my first guest of season 2. So I'm super excited. How are you today?
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I'm doing well. Doing well. It's frosty. It's it's a bittersweet day. It feels good. It feels okay.
Do you know what? I actually went for a walk this morning in the frost, and I'm a bit of a bird nerd, so I took my camera and took some pictures as well. But it's really healing. I think nature's really good for the mental health.
Yeah. I like going on walks and I like doing that, but when it's frosty and when it's evidently cold and it's very challenging for me to get out, so I just kind of kid myself into just working harder. Yeah. So that I've got things to do, so I can't really go. But I probably will head outside in about an hour or so. But yeah.
Yeah, no. I was saying before we kind of recorded that I'm super excited to speak to you, and I'm just going to hold the book up because I know there's this video, so I'm going to show this book, this amazing book that Alex has written called "Time to Talk," which was written I think a couple of years ago now, right?
Yeah,
as well. So tell me, I just wanted to dig into this before you wrote the book. So tell me about yourself. So tell me what led you to kind of write this book and your background.
So my story was a bit freewheeling, but essentially I was a journalist for 5 years, and in that time I was working as a news reporter, and so what happened was I was teaching abroad in 2015, and I sat down and I figured to myself, I need to think of my options for when I come back to the UK, and what can I do? What do I want to do? And there were several options there. It was go down the master's route and do something based on my undergrad degree in languages and linguistics or something, enter into journalism, enter into publishing, something along those lines. And I always wanted to write, so I've always been somebody who loves writing and reading. And my dad sent me an application form for the Daily Mail newspaper, and it was a diversity scheme that they're working alongside the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust, and it was just like, I'm gonna just try something new, I'm gonna try something different and see what happens. And so I just applied, sent them an email, sent them my CV. And I got into working in journalism, and that kind of set off a chain of events that I never realized were specifically interconnected than I did when I was by the time I got out of journalism, I sat back and thought about it all. But in that time I worked in local papers, and then I went to the national papers and I started working there. But at the back of my mind, I learned valuable skills in writing and how to write and what that looked like and discipline and whatnot. But I think that what was missing for me was the real passion things, like the real working with people, the real the joy I had of working with young people, working just really closely, because before then I was doing mentoring, I was doing youth work, I was teaching, I was doing all these different things, and I began to miss that as a soul enriching kind of activity, really helping the development of young people in that way. And but the more and more I continued working down this path, the more and more I strayed away from what I felt was my purpose and my vision and the things that I wanted to do. I was kind of really shaping myself into somebody that I didn't recognize anymore. And all of these ideas about what it meant to be a man at this age, this was around 24, 25, what it meant to be a man at this age, the kind of the earning potential, the way I kind of present myself. So a lot of things. I mean, I'm wearing an earring now, and I had to take my earring out. I felt like I couldn't be myself. Certain thing, and it was just really, I was conforming to a culture that was very, how can I put it? It was very stuck in its ways and very old. It's a 200-year paper right? And it's
Yeah, exactly.
it's a very notorious industry. And
Yes.
and you know, it has a very specific industry, a very masculine dominated. You know, go out, grab the story by the horns, and like, you know, be the savior of journalism each day, sort of thing. That's pretty much the energy that it was.
You know what, though? I think it's so impressive that you realised this about yourself quite early on, only 24. So it must have, the impact on you like that early is quite incredible. That self-awareness is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it was all there. It wasn't fully formed. I mean, I'm better at articulating a lot of these things now, but it was definitely not fully formed. And I put it at the back of my mind. I pushed a lot of stuff away because I thought to myself, okay, I have to go through this. I have to go through this. It's going to be better on the end. It's going to be better. It's going to be better. It's going to be better. I continued, and I then, you know, in my time, not necessarily specifically there, but in the industry, working as a journalist, I had 3 breakdowns, just based on the immense pressure that I felt, and the kind of living outside of my values sort of feeling. And but one of my friends sat me down and really said to me, look, like, where do you find peace? Where do you find your peace, sort of thing? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then she said, okay. She said, okay, look, you're really finding it really tense at work. You're finding it tense at home, because I just moved back from being away for 5 years. I studied away, I'd worked away, lived abroad, I'd done all these things, and now you're back at home, and now you're back like under your roof. So you're kind of not finding really much peace at home, and your friendships aren't necessarily the best quality friendships that you could have. I mean, you've got a few good friends, but then you're kind of in this thing where there's loads of different people who want your friendship, but you can't really give them too much. You don't have the space for that. So it's kind of ripping away at you, like kind of pulling you apart in a sense. And they sat down, and they left me with that. They left me with that kind of thinking, and I thought to myself, where am I finding my peace? Where am I finding that? I sat down and realized that it wasn't necessarily that I was not happy at work. It wasn't necessarily that. It was just one part of a puzzle that was kind of contributing to everything else. I wasn't necessarily happy with a lot of things. I wasn't necessarily happy with myself, with how I valued myself, with the kind of way that the belief I had in myself. I had a lot of self-doubt. I had a lot of pain. There was a lot that was just not kind of resolved in me. I was deeply sad for a long time. I was very lonely, and I wasn't doing much to help me through it. I had poor self-image, I had poor self-recognition. There were loads of different things that was going on, and I just said, look, these breakdowns are there for me to recognize that something isn't right, and I need to listen to what is going on there. And then the stress of work got so bad, it started to affect me physically. And that's when I made the decision, I have to leave this job. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to go into. I don't know whether it's going to be safe anywhere else, but my body is not responding well to how I feel in these spaces. And once I left journalism for good in 2019, that's when I came to writing the book and setting up the podcast, and I began to just chart down all of the things. But prior to leaving, I was writing a column called Men Talk Health, and that was on the metro.co.uk. And
amazing.
Yeah, and I started writing, and I started kind of interviewing a lot of men about their mental health or their physical health or whatever things that men don't really talk about, whether it be their diabetes or their dad with Alzheimer's or breath work or something along those lines. And then when it came down to writing the book, I thought, actually, I've got ample amount of interviews from my podcast asking the same questions. I've got ample amount of conversations from the column asking similar questions. So, and that's how the book came to be. It was just birthed out of my curiosity around what masculinity is, my experience about crumbling under my own versions of but my own burdens of expectation, and and just my insatiable need to write things. So it just kind of all came together.
And I can imagine that's incredibly healing, right? Like writing, the whole process of writing, I'm sure, is healing. Like the first thing sometimes I ask people to do is journal. If they're struggling with their thoughts, like put it down on paper and see how you're feeling. And I really admire that you are able to, even though you're suffering from these breakdowns, I really admire, and it's inspiring that you're able to see yourself start pushing past it as well and doing something to help yourself, whereas lots of people stay in that flow, don't they? Stay in that rut, and it gets worse and worse for them. Like what pushed you out to seek better? Like, was it just that joy of writing and being curious, do you think?
No, so basically I when my friend asked me where am I finding peace, it was then I was directed to go to therapy, and I think it was in therapy that I started to have the conversations that I needed to be having, whether that be family, relationships, friendships, work, what I want for myself, the kind of things that I just needed to know. And then my nan passed away in 2019, and it was like I needed to kind of process that grief again. I needed to understand who I was without her here now, and what that meant for the family, and all these different things, and the like. So it was just it was a multitude of things. I'd always journaled. That was something that I'd started journaling when in 2011. My dad handed me a notebook and said, "You want to be a writer? Here's a journal. Do that." Sort of thing. And
Amazing.
I was like, "Okay, fine." But so I went with it, and I've just been journaling ever since. And it's also so me getting all my thoughts into paper was just something I did naturally anyway. I was always writing something about something. Even prior to that, I used to write like fan fiction and all these other kind of stuff. I had loads of notebooks that I was consistently scribbling ideas in. And but when I went to therapy, I think just the therapeutic side of it all, being able to sit down and really process my feelings in a way that I had never done before, was important, and that's what I needed to do. Yes,
and I think not a lot of us do that, and I think that when it comes to finding, and you speak about being authentic, right? Your authentic self. When it comes to being authentic, your emotions are a core part of it, right? Your emotions are your North Star, and we're not taught the core of us in school, at home, at work, anywhere.
No.
About how to process the emotions, right? And that's where, what I love, you start with in your book about the inner critic. Because we have that inner voice, don't we, in our heads that can be negative. And we doubt ourselves, our self-esteem, our self-image, our confidence, whatever it is. And I love that you start with that as well. And it does, if you're not aware of it, then it's going to be on your mind all the time. You're going to think about these thoughts all the time. Tell me more about the inner critic and how it affects people.
So a lot of my framework, which is pretty much, it starts with shame. It starts with shame. It starts with a pain point. It starts with where we kind of are coming from, and our beliefs are a huge part of that kind of pain point. And the inner critic is that part of you that is, it's the most unyielding voice. Sometimes we wouldn't sit back and let somebody talk to us in particular ways. We wouldn't let somebody do that. But when it comes to the inner critic, we kind of let that we let it slide a lot of the time. So the inner critic is built up typically of various beliefs that you have about yourself, and that have been instilled in you in various situations. It might not be from your parents, it might be from teachers, it might be from other relatives, it might be from friends, it might be those kinds of voices that have lent criticism to you about particular things that were unfounded or unjustified in certain ways. You've taken them, carried them through as beliefs, and now you live by those beliefs, and then those are the criticisms. just recently, over the weekend, it was my friend's birthday, and I went to spend some time with, you know, a group of friends away, and we were all talking and whatnot, and I was eating a croissant, and I took some jam and I put it on the croissant, and I said out loud, "Oh, I shouldn't really be doing this. This is not something I should be doing." And they were like, "Why? Why should you be eating jam?" And I said,
Jam.
I said, "I don't know why I shouldn't be eating jam, but." And as I said it, I kind of not regretted saying it, but I knew what I was saying and why I was saying it, because I'm good at understanding where these things are coming from anyway. So I explained that. I explained that growing up, when I was in primary school, a lot of kids had jam sandwiches for packed lunch. And whenever I had packed lunch, I had tuna sandwiches, corned beef sandwiches, or chicken slices or something along those lines. And every time I asked for a jam sandwich, my mum would never give me one. She would always just be like, she's like, it's not healthy. I'm not making you a jam sandwich. You know, it's not what you need to be having.
Brain boy should have.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have protein. These are the things that you're supposed to be having. It's healthy stuff. I understand that now.
That's a good mama, man.
I know. As we grow up, like, it's just one of those things. So subconsciously now, that kind of understanding, that belief around, you know, jam itself, and applying it. Obviously, there's no problem with me doing that now. I could do what I want, but it's just those things creep up every so often, and they're just like, where did they come from? Like, I feel, you know, there is a part of me there's like a slight tinge of, oh, should I be eating that? Is that something that I should be having? And you start questioning whether it's something that you are allowed to have or whether you should have. Now, that's a very mild example, but imagine now imagine you're a young person and they said, you know, this is why you're overweight. You only eat jam sandwiches, and you know you're never going to lose weight if you keep eating that stuff, that sweet stuff. If you keep asking me for chocolates and things like that, you're never going to X, Y, and Z. As a child, for example, you've upheld that kind of belief. I'm never going to lose weight. I'm never going to be able to do that because I'm eating all this stuff because I'm a bad person. So now, as an adult, you are either overly health conscious or you lack discipline in certain areas when it comes to food, and your critic is telling you, every time you want to have something that's sweet or something that is a treat for you, you're like, oh, I can't have that. That's not that. I could, you know, me. I don't deserve that. That's something that I'm not good. That's not good for me, and all these different things. When ultimately you have a choice to make, and if you're making a mindful choice or a distancing choice, then that's the case of it. But the idea of the inner critic is that these are beliefs built up for you over time, and then you think about those things a lot over and over and over again, and because you've done that, you've embodied it as part of your identity and your own process.
Yeah, and I think that if you aren't able to manage or be aware of your inner critic, it gets worse and worse and worse, doesn't it? Like, so if you're beating yourself up constantly, you will have, depression, anxiety, mental health issues. It could turn into physical issues, disease, addictions, that sort of stuff as well. And, you know, like, there's some shocking facts. I mean, you put this in your book about, you know, sort of mental health stats, but particularly with men, you know, like, there's high suicide rates, particularly after 40. As well, you know, like it was tragic. Recently reading about, is it DJ Twitch? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he was part of the Ellen Show, and he was a DJ and a dancer, always happy, and he committed suicide.
Yep.
You know, and it was heartbreaking that, you know, from the outside he seemed to have everything, but actually he was in pain from the inside. Mm-hmm. You know, as well. And I think people sit with that pain for so long and come to a point where they can't tolerate it anymore. You know, and I think men particularly struggle with that as well.
Mm. Yeah, men, they particularly struggle with that. I think it's various issues, but I think the few that make the most sense of the conversation are the societal expectations of what men are supposed to be and who they're supposed to be, and for what reasons.
Yes.
And you know, that is the biggest pressure there, men. And But it does all start from boyhood. It starts from a time of. It starts from a time of you are focused on not being a girl as a boy. That's basically what you've been conditioned to do. You've been, that's the worst possible thing that you could be, a girl or girly or or not boyish. Being boyish,
man enough.
Yeah, man enough, boy enough. But you're not praised for being, sensitive or caring or just gentle. Generally, you're pretty much praised for being boisterous, rough, a bit chaotic, as a boy and things like that, and kind of, that's what's pretty much praised. It's pretty much expected of boys in that way, and I say likely the same for girls in the opposite way. So when you kind of when you scoop out all of that kind of emotion or the feelings of sadness and being able to articulate your sadness and all this sort of stuff, and leave boys with a lot of aggression and anger only, really. They get to a point where they grow up and they're feeling all of these emotions. They're feeling a lot of these pressures. They probably don't feel like they have much by way of, healthy and social relationships. And if everything is an external locus of evaluation, when what happens when those things are taken away from you, or those things are no longer exist, what happens to you internally? So, a lot of men are going towards suicide because they probably find that, their life has much more value when they're dead. And I read a really sad explanation of this recently, whereby it was in America. Life insurance is a big thing over there. It's a big thing in the UK, but we don't really speak about it as much. But life insurance is huge over there, and a lot of men in families are dying spontaneously, but they can't put suicide down as a cause because they wouldn't get the insurance payout for their family. So a lot of men they either come back from wars, or they come back from or they'll get fired from jobs, or and they don't see themselves as valuable or worth anything. They don't feel they can contribute to the home in the way that their wives or partners do. They don't feel like they're contributing as a father. They don't feel they're contributing to society. With all this other conversation around what the purpose of men and what men are actually doing now today as well. That added to the pot of a lot of different things. It's difficult for a lot of men to kind of articulate or know where to listen and know what to listen to. And a lot of men then still don't speak about it. So because it's conditioned, it's a condition. Like, a lot of men do not speak about the stuff that they go through, because will anybody listen? Will anybody care? All of this stuff that run through a lot of men's minds in these cases. So if they feel that their life has more value, when it's not here, then they'll do it. But because they know that at least their families can get the payout, they know that at least their kids are taken care of and all these different things. So when that happens, but they have to die in a way that isn't clearly a suicide. It has to be something that that could have questionable doubt around it. And while a lot of the wives know that it's suicide, they can't say because they won't be able to pay off their houses or look after their kids and all these different things. So it's a very awful cycle that we're finding ourselves in, and I think it's very important that we do start with both looking at our boys and what our boys are going through, and kind of really finding ways to support them, but also being there for the men in a sense, like there are men that are difficult to reach, and which is why I think it's important that men are doing the work to reach other men, and it's not on the shoulders of women to do that. But men need to be reaching other men, because men are typically hard to reach, and they don't always respond well to women, because of other sexist and misogynistic experiences and ideas and beliefs, and we have to be the ones to undo all of that. So yeah,
it's heartbreaking, isn't it, that not valuing your life, as well. It's like, it's one of those things where like someone works, like a man works till, like, and this happens a lot in the older generation, where they work till 65, 70 all their lives, same job, then the job finishes and they retire, but there's nothing else that they have in purpose, so they get depressed. And they feel like their life isn't valuable anymore, and it's really sad to hear that. And I completely agree. I think that the work does start at the boy age, when they're youngsters, but we don't do enough in schools, I don't think, to help that, facilitate that. I think our education system is sort of quite archaic. It doesn't deal with the core stuff that we need to be. We end up in therapist chairs, and we struggle and get to know ourselves. So I think it's completely spot on that needs to happen. And also men supporting each other as well, I think, is super important, and reaching out and knowing that there's support out there for you. But in your book, you talk about the compassion and self-love, but also being your authentic self as well. Tell me more about that. Like, what can people do? What can men do to kind of formulate that and help themselves around that?
Well, to be more compassionate to themselves, I think. And
that self-love as well.
I think it's and after writing it, I was reflecting a lot on what I put in, and I thought to myself, actually, it does need to go. I do need to go further on that, and I have been thinking a lot further about it as well. And I think as men, we do need to be less harsh on ourselves when it comes to the things we do and the things we put out and produce. I have moments, really deep moments of really lack of self-compassion, lack of gentleness for myself, and I have those kinds of they're really challenging moments for me. Like I think even most of last year, I sat in this same chair and I just really said, "Oh, you need to hurry up and get to where you need to be. That's you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like, I mean, you're not doing this right. You're not doing this X, Y, and Z." And being very harsh on myself. I'm not where I'm supposed to be at this point in life, and you need to hurry up and pull your finger out and start doing this. And that's and I think that I do feel like a lot of men are used to that kind of leadership, that kind of direction. We see it in the army, we see it in the police, we see it in the fire brigade, we see it in the ambulance, we see it in teaching, we see it everywhere, right? A lot of coaching, football, sport, everything. Whenever there is a male leader, the leadership is not necessarily compassionate leadership. Generally, it's usually quite directive. It's quite authoritative. It's quite militaristic. It's really that. And yes, there are places for these things. There are places for all of that. And it is not solely men who are doing that. But again, it's a very masculine idea, or an archaic masculine idea of how to lead and direct people. But unfortunately, that's not the way that the world is going right now. I think we need to take into consideration that yes, we do need strong directives. Some people do need to just be told to go with a direction and to focus on that thing. But I think that we do need to have a bit more of a compassionate worldview when it comes to certain things. And unfortunately, a lot of men have this idea or have an experience of being kind of guided in that way, in a very strict and dominant way. And that's the voice that kind of really rears up, because, a lot of men, that's the only way we know how to communicate with one another. Because I mean, negative reinforcement does work. It gets you to where you need to be. It just
do something else. Yeah.
Yeah. It just doesn't it doesn't necessarily, the way you're operating from is slightly different though when you get there, Again, positive reinforcement again has its limitations as well. So the point is, what I'm really trying to say is that is that, yeah, we do need that, we do need the balance of the two, but we need to really understand how we talk to ourselves. Really understand that it, like, you know, being okay with stuff not necessarily panning out the way we want it to the first time, and being okay with that, because we could then live authentically in that way, because we can just say, okay, cool, yeah, I didn't get the promotion this time, doesn't have anything to do with me as a person and as a thing, but it's more to do with the particular set of events that happened at that space. It has nothing to do with me being able to do my job. It's probably not right for me anyway, and I need to start focusing on what is and what can be and what I can control. So for me, it's all about reframing. It's all about reframing the situation to kind of figure out, to give me just a bit more of a compassionate view, especially for myself, so that I can navigate the world wholeheartedly and authentically.
Absolutely. And it's so important that self-compassion is incredibly important to be able to like move forwards, I think, as well. And actually when I sort of do some coaching around leadership, it is about compassion, it's about empathy as well for yourself, for others, as well, and teaching everyone that same sort of way of thinking. But do you feel like generations are changing? Like, I guess I'm coming from, look at my dad, he's like a baby boomer, Gen X, I guess you're a millennial, Gen Z coming up. Can you see any improvements coming up from people talking more and, you know, support out there and that sort of stuff? Because mental health is shocking. The figures are shocking of, you know, the burden of disease, you know, especially with depression and anxiety. It's getting worse. You know, like, what do you think is happening? Is it not improving with generations?
Yeah. I do think it is improving. I do think that we are having more conversations in that way, but I do think we are we're at a very interesting point in the conversation. And I watched a film over Christmas called About a Boy, Hugh Grant and Nicholas Hoult.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a story about mental health. It literally is about mental health and masculinity generally, and father figures and whatnot. That was made in 2002. It's 21 years later, and we are still having the same conversations.
Correct.
And I just think it's going in circles because we're not making any real lasting infrastructural systemic change around it. We are still grinding for the same slice of a pie that everybody else is grinding for example, or everyone, like, you know, like mental health was bad back in the day, but I guess it's all relative to the people that are going through it, isn't it? Like, I want to say as a young person, because I feel like I still am a young person, because ultimately,
yes, you are.
Because I am still navigating this world of still trying to find my own, being able to afford my own property, or being able to live independently of my parents and whatnot, and trying to do all of that. But, you know, if this was 20 years ago, this probably wouldn't be heard of. I wouldn't be in a similar situation, but there would still be certain levels of mental health that I would probably be experiencing, based on the environment, based on the community.
Agreed. Absolutely.
So I guess, you know, like, you know, as things advance and as people advance, and, you know, there's new technologies come in and all these different things, the mental health conversation shifts and alternates. But I do think that at its base, I think that we haven't really got into the core of the issue. The same thing that we are all fighting for every single day. And it's basically just based on that inequality, injustices, and, you know, like, and just a quality of life that just not many people have the privilege of experiencing a lot of the time. And, you know, and once we get rid of these expectations, for example, so if we're looking specifically at gender, where I kind of sit on the intersection with mental health. If we look at gender, you know, there are just a lot of pressures. There's just a lot of pressures, like societally, on men to do particular things. I do find that women give other women room to breathe, and in what I mean, in some there are some conflicts, obviously, as you would expect, but in the main, from what I observe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like women give women a lot more room to be themselves.
Yes.
You know, even if they don't necessarily agree. But, you know.
No, it's that feminine energy. We all have feminine energy, regardless what gender we are, right? And it's just being able to access, that, and being able to talk to each other and not feel ashamed of it as well. And I think you're right when it comes to inequality, equity, and communities. Like, certainly from being from Indian backgrounds, my parents' generation never talked about mental health. My generation just about talk about mental health, but it's hidden. If someone's, got bipolar or depression, it's like, oh, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Just brush it under the carpet. It's terrible, and it's I don't see that changing fast enough as well, because there's so many nuances, isn't there? And how we access mental health services as well. Like, is it equitable for different communities? I don't think it is.
No.
It's definitely not. No.
No.
It's underfunded as it is. Mental health services are underfunded as they are.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And how people, as you say, just how people access these kind of services is really important too. And, with a large percentage of Black and brown people entering the mental health services through criminality is actually quite disturbing to me as a fact that happens.
Yes.
It's just actually quite sad to me. And if it's, and when it comes to women, for example, when it comes to them giving birth and you're a person of color, it's a bit like, okay, so am I going to make it out here alive, sort of thing. So now something as happy as you wanting to grow your family and start a family and, do something as natural as childbirth to you, now you're even more anxious on top of being anxious about bringing life into the world. You're anxious that you're going to make it out and whatnot. So there's all these different things. And then, obviously if we're thinking about, if it's a heterosexual relationship, for example, and then the man is there with them, there's a certain level that they don't understand because they are not women, but they all they understand is pain and and they're conditioned to think, what can I do to help you now?
Yes.
And what can I do to support you? And so, and if they feel they can do that, they suffer and they struggle with that mentally. So it becomes a cycle just all over the place. And I'm just like, we need to start guttering out the systemic issues here so that we can actually just kind of actually have some meaningful dialogue now.
Indeed. We have a lot of work to do, Alex. We have a lot of work to do. Sometimes, but it's making that one change at a time, right? If you can impact, like you have already, just writing this book and, people to read this.
I'm glad to hear it. Honestly.
I know. I think it's an incredible thing that you're doing. And how can, what resources are there, though, for men to access if they're struggling with their mental health?
That depends on... That really depends on a lot of different things. You can access me as a resource. I have, I have podcasts. I have blogs. I am, coaching men in that area, as well as setting up my therapy practice too as a separate thing. So there's that, but there's also, outside of me, there's men's groups. There are other podcasts and things to look at, to listen to and to listen to with regards to men's mental health. And one of them I will always suggest is the Man Enough podcast with Justin Baldoni, and he has real meaningful conversations on men's mental health as well, and just the kind of state of masculinity right now. So he explores all of those areas, and I think it's just about knowing where to look and what to look for and kind of figuring out what that is. But yeah, I think when it comes down to resources, I'm always just like, it's always better to just start to become curious as to
Yes.
what you want to look for. You know, I mean, when it comes to men's mental health, I think it's good to start looking and searching and trying to figure out who's saying what where. You know, they're always saying men need to get to therapy, and if your immediate response is no, we don't, but not okay, let me have a look and see what that looks like.
Exactly.
You know, just, you know, I mean, just
exactly.
I feel like it's just there are everything is there, everything's out there for us. It's just trying to figure out the best steps. So I'd say, you know, men's groups are a good way into therapy, because I think, you know, they're safe spaces. They're typically safe spaces. You know, if you find a good one, you know, you can sit in the group, you can make good friends, you can build community in that way.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good way to start. Yeah.
I always found picking up a book, I was a bit scared of therapy before. I've done lots of it now over the years, but I thought picking up a book was always helpful, you know, and just reading as well, and writing, like you said.
I think men need to go and spend time in the self-help section. Go and spend time in the self-help section.
100%.
Right, not the business, not the business books. Go spend time in the self-help section.
I've spent a lot of time in the self-help section for sure. And there's still the same books around as well, you know, which are really beautiful and really lovely to read as well. You know, for you, Alex, so like, you know, you come from journalism background, you know, you've been finding your feet and finding your path over the last couple of years as well. What does the next couple of years look like for you, do you feel like? What is it that you, based on your values and beliefs, what is it that you'd like to do? What's your purpose?
My purpose is to help men lead wholehearted lives.
Beautiful.
And I'm a man, and I'm helping myself lead a wholehearted life. I live everything I embody, and I embody everything I teach, and everything I write informs what I teach, and all these different things. So everything is, for me, is just, I'm on an ongoing cycle of just learning about myself and developing that, so I can help other people learn about themselves and develop that. So yeah, I think the next couple of years, finishing off my psychotherapy qualification, continuing as a hypnotherapist in particular areas, coaching men, working with them to, you know, become the kind of men that they want to be and want to be proud of, who they are.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, and hopefully at some point that might extend to women and and the like. But for now, I'm just kind of focusing on men right now. But yeah, I think that's what I would love for it to be. That's what I'd love for it to look like.
That sounds amazing, and it sounds like it's such a purposeful journey, but such a authentic one for you, but also helping other people, and especially men, work through this is essentially really, really important to do. It's important work, I think. And I always ask this question, like, how, because based on the PowerWithinYou podcast, how do you find the power within you to manage your mental health now and moving forwards in the future? What are you going to do? Like, what can you do for yourself generally that helps?
I give myself grace.
Yes.
I give myself time. I give myself love. I give myself all of those things so that I can function fully and mindfully.
Yes. And process, no?
And process, well. Yeah. I put myself in situations where I have to challenge myself. I have to be pushed to the new phase of me, to the new level of me. None of this is easy work. None of this is just you wake up the next morning and you are healed and you're a ray of sunshine and birds are singing to you and life is just great. I mean, there are days like that. There are sometimes hours like that, but the whole time is not. You know, sometimes you have to be able to embrace the bad or the difficult or the stressful and figure out how you manage that stuff and how you bounce back from that too. So a lot of the work is around resilience and care and the like. So
Indeed.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. If I give myself grace, peace, love, and compassion,
That's what you
keep it pushing.
I love that.
Yeah,
That's all the basic stuff, and I think that just those core things keep me going as well. I think that's, if you can listen to that, everyone, I think that's really wonderful advice, to give yourself that time, peace, and love. Alex, how can people get in touch with you?
I'm mainly on Instagram. My Instagram is by Alex Holmes. So that's BY Alex Holmes, HOLMES. So you pretty much find me there, but I'm on my website is alexholmes.co, so alexholmes.co. My Substack is alexholmes.substack.com, which has got my blog posts, newsletter, so you can sign up for regular posts on that. My podcast is the Mindful Man podcast, where we are exploring a lot of these topics in depth. And I guess that's it for now. Just stay tuned
Watch your space
when programs are released and, coaching stuff is coming out. But, that's pretty much it.
I think it's, please do, if he sorts Alex, I think he's a wonderful, wonderful man to speak to. I've certainly enjoyed my conversation with you today, Alex, as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining me. And I cannot wait to see what you do next, and also hopefully meet for a coffee in North West London soon as well. I'd love to see you in person.
Absolutely. Yes, we're connected now. So just drop me a message or
100%.
along the time.
That sounds good. Alex, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you.